Bien, bonjour et bienvenue à notre rendez-vous de midi. Nous sommes aujourd'hui le lundi 17 avril. La réunion préparatoire des chefs de cabinet vient de se conclure et je peux donc vous annoncer les points qui seront à l'agenda du collège de demain qui, je vous le rappelle, a lieu à Strasbourg. Le collège discutera un paquet d'initiatives sur l'éducation et les compétences numériques qui vous sera présenté par la vice-présidente exécutive Margrethe Vestager et la commissaire Maria Gabriel à 15 h en salle de presse au Parlement européen à Strasbourg. Le collège adoptera aussi un train d'initiative sur la cybersécurité. Celui-ci sera présenté par la vice-présidente exécutive Margrethe Vestager, le vice-président Margaritis Schinas et le commissaire Thierry Breton, aussi à Strasbourg. Et enfin, les membres du collège adopteront un paquet sur la gestion des crises bancaires et l'assurance des dépôts. Cela fera l'objet de la dernière conférence de presse demain à Strasbourg avec le vice-président exécutif Valdis Dombrovskis et la commissaire Mairead McGuinness. De même, sur ce sujet, nous préparons un briefing technique qui aura lieu aujourd'hui à 16 h ici en salle de presse. Voilà pour nos annonces d'aujourd'hui. Je vous invite maintenant à poser vos questions. Yes.
Hi, Shandor from Euronews. The decision of Hungary and Poland about suspending agricultural imports from Ukraine, do you think this respects the previous EU agreements and EU law?
Thank you. I'm not sure what you mean by previous agreement. Could you specify?
Yes, the tariff-free regime.
Myriam.
Thank you very much. Maybe let me start by saying that we are already in contact with the relevant authorities, so the authorities of the EU member states that are announcing these measures, and also the authorities of Ukraine, to properly understand the scope of the measures and the legal basis, because we don't have full clarity on that. In parallel, of course, it's important to remind that trade policy is of exclusive competence, which means that it's at European Union level that such decisions can be taken, and it's why we have been saying that unilateral action is not possible under EU trade policy. The legal basis in this case, we have, as you know, a deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with Ukraine, and in the framework of this deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, there is tariff suspension of most of the products, on all of the products, This is something that we proposed until June this year, and now we have on the table a new proposal to continue this suspension, because of course it's very important to continue supporting Ukraine in these very challenging times, while of course we are aware of impact on EU farmers.
Shall I follow up?
Yes, so 2 weeks ago the Commission's assessment was that this problem, the price problem, is not affecting the whole EU internal market. Do you think the situation changed significantly in the last 2 weeks that now maybe you will make further steps?
Thank you. When you refer to the Commission assessment of 2 weeks ago, I assume you are referring to the first package of measures that was introduced, and there we acknowledged already the impact of oversupply in some of the EU bordering countries, and that's why we put forward a proposal to give support to the countries mostly affected, in this case Poland, Bulgaria and Romania. And then, of course, we are aware that there are also other countries, and there was a discussion in the framework of the European Council, and that's when we said we would consider, and we are working now on a second package of measures, where we would continue supporting these countries that are being affected by the imports from Ukraine.
Yeah.
If I'm Bandriga, Deutsche Welle, if I'm remembering correctly, for 2 weeks ago you said you are prepared to pay 30 million euros in this first package. What would the second package incorporate? Are you willing to pay more to solve these problems?
So actually, the first package was 56 million euro from the agricultural reserve. This is a reserve that we have in place for emergency situations like this one, and they can be triggered very fast, and that's what we did, and it was adopted very quickly. Now we are considering a second package. This is still under discussion, so we cannot provide any details at this stage on the amount or on the allocation criteria. But what is important to highlight is that we are taking into consideration the impact of these increased imports on the frontline countries. And we are very grateful that these countries have been helping and supporting Ukraine to move products out of Ukraine because of the blockage of other exit ports that is happening because of the war. And in this context, we are discussing, but we don't have details yet on the second package.
Yeah, Carl.
Sorry.
Yes, Miriam, and can you please give us some details on what kind of grains are involved? Is it wheat? Is it maize? And do you have an assessment of the nature of the problem? Do you know why the exporters in these countries cannot or do not want to re-export these grains?
Thank you. I think, Carl, you would need to contact directly these countries to get more details on this kind of information. We are not in a position at the European Commission to comment on that. What we can say is that we are aware of the impacts and the concerns of these countries, and that's why we are discussing a second package of support.
Yes, please, the lady just before the one. Yeah. Oh, okay, go ahead. A bit more to your right, but go ahead.
Nasłejska Proźdzeli Rzeczpospolita. Actually, I understand there are two issues here. One issue is what kind of the problem, what is the dimension of the problem with imports that is being kept or being sold on the markets of border countries, and the other thing is what Poland, Hungary, and maybe other countries will do with the unilateral measures. So on the first thing, I would like to ask you, because I understand that there was also the issue of always the issue of grain imports, but Poland also imposed a ban on other agricultural food products. Have you been aware before? Have Poland complained about other products, or is it new for you? And second thing, on the issue of unilateral measures itself, because it's on one hand you are saying you are in contacts with Polish or Hungarian authorities. You are asking what is the legal basis, etc. But you are also saying there is no legal basis. I mean, we have exclusive competences on this. So what are you waiting for with your, I mean, what can the dialogue with the Polish authorities, in this case, I'm not saying about how to react to the oversupply of grain, etc., but in this case of introducing this Polish or Hungarian law, why are you waiting with your reaction? Thank you.
Thank you. So on your first question, as we have already acknowledged here, we did receive a letter from 5 EU countries, those bordering Ukraine, where they asked us, they expressed their concerns on the trade flows with Ukraine, and they asked for the consideration of some measures. So this is something we are analyzing and we are checking. On the legal basis, I think it's, as I said, EU trade policy is of exclusive competence. We need to understand under which basis these countries are introducing such import bans to be able to give a more definite answer. So at this stage, it's too early. These were announced during the weekend, so we have not received full details yet on the measures.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Ukrainian news agency Interfax, Ukraine, Irina Somer. Miriam, what is the time frame when actually European Commission will be ready to come out with a second package of proposal on this issue? Thank you.
We don't have a specific time frame. We do hope it will be happening very quickly within the next days, that we might be able to put already forward the proposal. And then, of course, the Commission proposal has to be adopted by member states, so then it will take a bit more time in that sense. But don't forget that the first measure was adopted on the 20th of March. I mean, was proposed by the Commission on the 20th of March, and it was adopted by member states on the 30th of March. So it was quite fast adoption. We would expect the same for the second support measure.
Yeah, in front. Yeah, yeah, please. Sorry, there are many new faces, so I don't know all your names. So it's also good if you present yourself like
Yeah.
Irina did.
Hi, I'm Gregorio Sorgi from Political Europe. I had a question on this compensation fund. I seem to understand that the Commission will go ahead with the proposal for this second compensation fund, even though some of the countries have announced that they will be banning the Ukrainian agricultural imports. But wouldn't you agree that the reasoning to have these second disbursements of funds is somehow weakened if the countries involved are no longer allowing the Ukrainian imports? Because then what would you be compensating them for?
I think we will not speculate on, comments or what we do or not do. We have a package already that has been adopted. We are discussing a second package because we are aware of the impact, and in parallel on the measures introduced by the different member states, we are in contact to try to understand and to try also to find solutions. So I would not really mix up both issues.
Yeah, follow up.
Have a follow-up on whether you have been notified by Poland and Hungary over the weekend about this action, or whether you've learned about this in other ways.
Again, we are not fully aware, as I discussed, on the legal grounds of such measures, so doesn't mean that they necessarily would need to notify in that case, because if we don't know the legal grounds, we don't know what are the different steps. But of course, we are in contact with the authorities to be able to understand, as I said, the scope of the measures, the legal basis, and be able to see what kind of actions can be taken in this context.
Yeah.
Olena Abramovich, Ukrainian TV Inter. I have also a follow-up question. If this trade issue is a exclusive competence of EU, without speculating, what kind of measures does European Commission have in the possession to take against countries who break those rules? Thank you.
Thank you. So as you properly said yourself, we do not speculate, so I'm not going to at this stage unveil what kind of measures we could potentially take.
Yeah, let me add here perhaps a point which is extremely important. We are dealing with a war, right? And this war has consequences, obviously, on farmers and more generally the population in Ukraine. And the European Union and its member states, among which Poland and all of the member states that border with Ukraine, have been doing their utmost in order to help Ukraine. And this is extremely welcome. The point is, of course, that it's not our objective, nor anybody's objective, to wreak difficulties on populations within the European Union whilst we are supporting Ukraine. So this is not about sanctioning, this is about finding solutions based on EU law in the interests at the same time of the Ukrainians and of the EU. This is how we need to look at this issue, whilst acknowledging, obviously, that we operate in a framework, in a context, which is that of EU law, and in that context, we need to make sure that we are respecting what that legal framework foresees. Oliver.
Thank you. On the 56 million package that was already introduced, I don't quite understand who exactly is being compensated for what. Because from what I understand, and maybe I'm completely wrong, the problem is that there's a huge amount of Ukrainian grain, apparently especially corn destined for animal fodder, coming into Poland. So there's a storage problem. But who's compensated there? Is it Polish farmers who don't find space to store their own corn and so they have to destroy it? Can you give us examples of who's exactly being compensated for what kind of loss? Because if they can store their grain and then sell it later because prices are too low now and they would sell that on in a couple of months, it's annoying for them currently, but they're going to make a profit in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months. So what kind of damages are being refunded by the EU budget?
Thank you, Oliver. So the money is given to the member states, and they are the ones that organize the distribution and the compensation for farmers. It's not something that is decided at EU level. What we considered when we had the requests from the countries concerned is also the situation of the market. For example, in those countries where there was oversupply, because there was not only the domestic production, but also the imports from Ukraine. In this context of oversupply, there was an impact on the market and on the prices, and that was an important element that was taken into consideration to decide to give this funding to these countries.
Yeah, I had forgotten your follow-up, so go ahead.
Yeah, Bernd Rieger, Deutsche Welle again. You're talking about solutions, Eric. Would one solution be to reintroduce duties for Ukrainian imports, as many politicians in the frontline stage suggest? Has the Commission an opinion on that? And who would take that decision? And the second one, is there any impact that you see on the ongoing negotiations on the so-called grain deal between Ukraine, Russia, and Turkey?
Thanks. I think that's all speculative, and we're not going to get into what currently is ongoing in terms of the preparatory work. We are, of course, in contact with the Polish authorities, with the Ukrainian authorities, with the Swedish presidency, etc., etc. So internal work is ongoing, but we're not going to speculate on what that could imply.
Hello, thank you. Natasha Foote here from Euractiv. Miriam, I know you said that you wouldn't speculate on the actions you will take or you're considering taking, but could you just outline the possible next steps the Commission could take if Poland and Hungary continue this? Like, could you spell out the options the Commission has if a country breaches an obligation on trade policy? Just generally what the options are the Commission has. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Natasha. As we are not in that scenario yet, I think it's a bit early to anticipate possible options. So I don't think it's the right moment now to start saying we could do this or could do that when it's not very clear.
Yeah, we're not going to go further into that. Sorry. Yes, please, at the back. Yeah.
Yes, Pia Gripenberg, Swedish Daily Dagens Nyheter. As I understand it, the deal with the grain in Ukraine was that EU was supposed to be a transit zone. The grain should pass the EU and then go to Northern Africa, for example. And why isn't this working? How come the grain is staying in the European Union?
Thanks. Sorry, the solidarity lanes is about much more. It's about exports of products from Ukraine. It's about getting products out of Ukraine. And it's also about getting products into Ukraine. And Adalbert can give you more details on that. What it is not is a sort of deal whereby the EU or the member states and Ukraine actually organize who are the final customers of the products that are shipped out or shipped in. This is left to the economic operators because it is clear that they are the best placed in order to ensure that on a market that is a world market, in particular when we're talking about grain, things can be sent to where they are needed. So it is not for us to basically be judging as to where the final destination of the products going out of Ukraine or what that final destination, should be. Maria, je pense que tu avais une question.
Merci. Maria Adrescu, La Libre Belgique. I'm going back to the question about how the Commission has been helping to mitigate the impacts of circulation of Ukrainian products. I mean, do you have examples of how the European support has helped on the ground neighboring countries? Because apparently it hasn't been enough. And on the transit, I mean, there is apparently some kind of a blockage within these countries. Do you have already options or anything in place to help transit fluidify it a bit better? Thanks.
Mosé, est-ce que tu pourrais, s'il te plaît, soit arrêter ton téléphone? Please stop your phone or exit the room. Thank you. And if I could ask, it's not the only phone which has been ringing, if I could ask everybody to make sure that your phones are on silent mode. Thank you very much. I believe that we've answered part of the question already before, but Miriam.
I think one important element to highlight is the role that the European Union is playing currently in the situation of a food security problem worldwide, and how we are really helping. And we are one of the largest producers of cereals, and we have been exporting more compared to last year. So, for example, if we look at the latest agri-trade report that was published last week, we see, for example, that for cereals and cereal preparations, we have increasing exports compared to the year 2021. These products were exported up to 40 billion euro in last year. And also, if we look at wheat, for example, wheat exports have also increased importantly, and the most important destinations were Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, and Nigeria. So I'm happy to provide further details after the midday briefing if you are interested, but just to show how the EU is really contributing to this global security issue by increasing its exports of cereals to third countries. So it's not just about transit of grain from Ukraine, but it's also the role that we are playing ourselves and that we are helping to support the problem globally.
So just to be very specific, the figures that Miriam was referring to are 2022 figures compared to 2021. And all of this, by the way, is in our daily news, not today, but we regularly, once a month, have, I think it's once a month, an agricultural trade report that comes out, and you always find a summary of that report in our daily news, so I advise you to look for those daily news items. We're, of course, ready to help find it again, but the information is there. Follow up?
Sorry, just to be sure that I understand correctly, you mean that these exports include Ukrainian grain, or it's only EU products? And just another thing, what impacts do you fear from the decision of Poland and Hungary on especially circulation or trade of Ukrainian products? I mean, how can this impact the support of Ukraine and exports of its cereals and grain? Thanks.
In terms of figures, it's very difficult for us to disaggregate, because once the products from Ukraine enter the EU market, they are part of the EU market and we don't distinguish them anymore. So when we talk about figures, we talk about global figures, be it products that were produced in the EU, be it products that were imported and then eventually processed in the EU and then re-exported. For us, what counts is the global totals and the figures that show that there is this increase and this continuous support, and the European Union is fully committed in this context to continue to help food security. And then in terms of impact, again, it's very difficult to analyze concrete impacts.
One thing I think we can say is that prices on world markets for wheat have fallen significantly compared to what they were after the beginning of the war. So it's clear that, even though we're not saying it is the only thing that has contributed, all the actions that have been taken by the European Union have contributed to making sure that there is sufficient supply on the world market in order for prices to fall. Oui, Anna de nouveau. Et ensuite Thomas.
Yes, sorry again on this, but I just want to be clear, because you a few times you didn't want to answer the hypothetical questions. What if? What are the instruments that Commission has in its possession if the countries in a breach of EU law in the area of trade? But I mean, the basic question is Poland in a breach of EU law or not?
Anna, Miriam has answered that question. We are looking into it. We are in contact with the Polish authorities. We are not going to say today whether somebody is in breach of EU law or not. We want to establish the facts. And this is why contacts are currently ongoing. So we're not going to come back on this question again.
Or not?
Sorry, I've just answered the question, Anna. Thomas.
I have two questions. Firstly, in view of this current development and the letter of leaders of 5 member states, does the Commission stand by its proposal to extend this full trade liberalization with Ukraine by another year? I mean, the proposal in the current form with the current safeguard clauses, or is there any, do you see any room to get these safeguard clauses strengthened? And secondly, on solidarity lanes, there are talks to be held between Poland and Ukraine even today on transit of agriculture products from Ukraine, and there is idea of sealing the shipments or also introducing the system of bales of deposits paid by transport operators just to prevent them from selling the cargo in the EU. So between the ceilings or deposits between, for example, Ukrainian-Polish border and Polish-Baltic seaports. Would it be legal in the framework of the trade liberalization? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So on the safeguard mechanism, we have already a safeguard provision in the current proposal, in the current suspension. And what we have done with the new proposal is to strengthen the safeguard mechanism, to make it stronger and to be able to use it in a faster and swifter manner compared to the current safeguard mechanism. So just to give you a few details, we have introduced a more robust monitoring. So every 2 months, we will have information, data, statistics on the imports and the impact of the measures to be able to analyze whether there is some action needed or not. Then we have also reduced the time frame for investigations, which under the current suspension is of 6 months, and under the future suspension, it will only be 3 months. So we have shortened by half to be able to eventually, if necessary, be able to apply the safeguard mechanism more quickly. And then the threshold for requesting an investigation has also been lowered for the union producers. And we have changed from those union producers facing serious difficulties to the EU market being adversely affected by the measures. So this assessment will help us to use the safeguard mechanisms already under our proposal, so we don't see any need to reform or modify a proposal because we have already taken into consideration the impact on EU farmers already under the current suspension and to be able to react more fast under the future suspension. And then on your second measure on the deposit, this is something, of course, that we would not comment.
Okay, I also have lots of hands raised in the chat, so I'll go there. David. David.
Hello. Yeah, on the legal basis, the Polish ministry has
Sorry,
published...
David, could you switch on your camera, please? Sorry. You know, it's our rule.
Yeah, the camera's not... I don't know. It's about the legal basis. It's been published by the Polish ministry. It's very clear that it's not a trade measure.
Yeah, sorry, David. We have a rule. I can't start making exceptions, or else this will really not work. I'm sure a colleague can help. Is Oliver? You want to ask a question from David?
So trying to help virtual David in the real world here. Apparently, the legal basis has been published by the Polish government. Have your legal services, the Commission services, already had the occasion to look at the legal basis? And if so, how long do you think your analysis of it will take? David just said, apparently it's published, there's legal basis, and apparently it doesn't seem to be a trade-related measure, but something else. And a question on the comment you made about the wheat prices dropping dramatically, you said, since the start of the war. In the Commission's political assessment, is this good or is this bad? Is it good having low global wheat prices, or is it rather bad because it might also be bad for investment in agriculture and so forth? And do you think the solidarity lanes had an impact on that? Why do you think wheat prices are low? Thank you.
Yeah, on your first question, I mean, unless I'm mistaken, the Polish legislation was published extremely recently. At least that's what I'm aware of. And therefore, as we have been saying, we need to analyze, and we are in contact with the Polish authorities. So that's precisely why we are not commenting on this, because as we stand here on the podium today in front of you, we are not in a position to give you an assessment from the Commission, a definitive assessment on what has been published by the Polish authorities. On your second question, I mean, there are always at least two sides to a coin, certainly. But what is clear is that when we set out to organize the solidarity lanes, it was in a context where the disruptions in the delivery of grain and other foodstuffs, because of Russia's war on Ukraine and the blockage of the main route of exports up until then from Ukraine, which was the Black Sea, was seen as a determining factor in creating a potential food crisis across the globe. And this is why it is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but it is one of the reasons why we set out to organize the solidarity lanes. What I'm just saying is that wheat prices have gone down. This was certainly one of the issues which was on our mind when we were organizing this. And therefore, it is one of the positive effects that we see. Again, it was not the only reason why we set out the solidarity lanes. It was also to allow Ukraine to export other types of goods. It was also to allow the EU to export goods to Ukraine. All this is an overall framework. Okay, I go back to Interactio. Joanna.
Hello. Can you see me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Hi. Joanna Sapinska for MLEX. A follow-up question on the modification of the safeguard clause. Miriam, you said the clause has been modified, there is a proposal, but I'm hearing that the member states, those affected by the imports, are asking for a regional approach, which means that because apparently it's a regional issue, it's not that the whole EU is affected by the imports, so why wouldn't the Commission consider modifying the clause so that the regional impact can be used by the member states to use the clause? And the second question is about the dialogue with the Polish and the Hungarian governments. You said you've been in touch with those governments. Did they specify what conditions must be met for the ban in Poland to be removed or not extended, or for the ban in Hungary to not happen because it hasn't been yet formally implemented? Did those member states ask for more money, more additional financial support, or is there anything else did they need? And also a follow-up question on Anna's question: did Poland communicate any issues with other products which are listed in the ban than the grain? Because this is quite a surprising move that Poland has included so many agricultural products in the ban. Thank you.
So that's a whole series of questions. Miriam, I hope you noted them down. Go ahead.
Thank you, Joanna. So on the safeguard provisions, as you know very well, our proposal is already tabled. And in our proposal, and this is common for all safeguard provisions, there is an impact on the EU market as a whole to be able to reintroduce the tariffs on those products that had tariffs before the suspension. So that has to be very clear. It's not about introducing tariffs on those products that were already duty-free. This is not allowed, but it would be those that were subject to tariffs before. So this is the proposal on the table. As I said, it is under discussion by Council and by the European Parliament. So we leave it there at this stage. We will further discuss with them, hoping that it can be adopted swiftly. Then on your follow-up questions on the conditions to be met. You mentioned that it covers other products. We are aware that the proposal is not only about grains, but also about other products. As you know, the suspension of the tariffs also concern not only grains and specifically just a few grains, but also other products such as poultry, eggs, dairy, etc. So we are aware that there are also concerns about that. And then I'm not sure I remember well if you had any more questions, or I'm covered already.
On Anna's question on, did you answer on more on what other products are covered?
I just mentioned other products that were covered. I'm not sure if there was something else.
Okay. Let's move on. Momshil. Switch on your camera and make sure that you don't have light behind you, but in front of you so that we can see you. Well, it seems we're not even at that stage yet. So whilst you try to connect, we will go to Axel.
Hear me and see me? Okay. Axel Mönch, Agrarzeitung.
No, hold on. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yes. Again, on the question of transit, do you see the possibility to make a distinction between cereals for the EU market and cereals for third country markets? And would that regulation for transit cereals be a solution for the Polish and Hungarian problem?
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, it's not competence of the EU, the transit. So once products come into the European Union market, they are free to move around the market, and then business operators are free to buy them eventually and to do their own business decisions. This is not something that we can control at EU level. What I mentioned before, and I think it's an important point, is that the EU continues to support global food security by continuing and increasing the exports of cereals to the world and ensuring that third countries in need, and particularly developing economies that were concerned about the war in Ukraine and the impact on food security, continue to receive these products. And as we have already mentioned, there is a positive impact on prices, and exports have continued to flow from the European Union and increase. So we do not see any major concern on that side for the moment.
David Clark. You need to press speak and switch on your camera.
Can you see me?
Not yet. Let's see if it works. We can see the top of your head.
Okay. Hello.
Now it's working.
Now it's working. So Russia has jailed opposition activist Vladimir Kara-Murza for at least 25 years. Does the European Commission have a reaction?
Yeah, David, I think you know the rules of the press room. We'll come back to your question. We're currently on a different issue, which is the issue of the export of grain and other foodstuffs from Ukraine. So we'll come back to you once we are finished with that question. If I could ask people to keep their hand raised only if it is on the issue we've been discussing since the beginning of midday, 40 minutes ago. David, you seem to have sorted out your camera problem, so you get another chance. It doesn't look good in the system, so I think you'll have to come back to us bilaterally. And we give one last try as well for Momshil.
I hope, okay, I hope you'll see me this time. Well,
no, yes.
Yeah.
Momshil,
okay,
we're so glad to see you.
Me too. Good afternoon. Well, Bulgaria also announced that it will seek a ban for import of grain from Ukraine. So my question is, has the Commission been notified by Bulgaria about which measures Bulgaria will take it, and is the Commission in contact with the Bulgarian authorities?
Yeah.
Thank you, Monchil. I already referred previously to a question on notification. So what I can say and repeat is that we are in contact with the relevant member states. We have been discussing already for a while on the impact of these increased imports from Ukraine, and this also covers Bulgaria. So we will continue to do so and try to understand eventually if any measures are introduced.
Okay, any last question on this? Mose.
Yes, thank you, Eric. It's related questions to previous questions. I wonder if the Commission has an indication that the cause of the problem might be some kind of internal market failure in those concerned countries bordering to Ukraine, that the economic operators, as you mentioned, instead, as it perhaps were supposed to do, to re-export the grain to other countries outside Europe and so on, they sell them on their own markets, undercutting the prices in competition with domestic production. Is that something you're going to look into? Thank you.
Again, we should not mistake the solidarity lanes for what they are not. The object of the solidarity lanes was to ensure that Ukraine could continue to export part of its grain, and then for economic operators to organize things in a way that was efficient from a market operations point of view. So we're not going to go into an analysis of how the market actually functions. Obviously, as Miriam has been saying, we have been looking at the consequences on the market of the general availability of grain and other foodstuffs, and proposing measures where it seems necessary in order to compensate EU farmers. But we're not going to go into more analysis than that here. Philippe.
Philippe Jacquet, Le Monde. Can you provide us with data on Ukrainian imports in the EU so that we have an overview of what amount of cereals and maize and everything is getting in?
Thank you. So imports into the EU are only available with a few months delay. So at this stage, if I was able to provide you figures, and I would need to check the exact details, they wouldn't be the latest figures, but probably the figures until January, February. And then our figures are also aggregated, so we will not be able to provide figures necessarily explaining the different products and the different impacts. But I'm very happy to check the latest available, which, as I said, would not be the latest, but the ones from previous months, and share with all those interested.
Okay, I see no further question on this issue, so we go back. Is it? No? Okay, then I go back to the question from David on Russia. Peter. Thank you, Miriam. Peter, do you need the question to be repeated? No? Okay. So, David, I hope that you are listening. We are back to your question.
Well, we will issue a statement by High Representative on this case, but since this is a very important case, let me summarize the main elements from this statement. The European Union, of course, was following this case of Mr. Vladimir Kara-Murza very closely. We strongly condemn the outrageously harsh sentence, because he got 25 years in prison for politically motivated reasons. This is unacceptable. This is yet another demonstration by Russian authorities of the political misuse of judiciary in order to pressure activists, human rights defenders, and any voices opposing Russia's illegal aggression against Ukraine. This so-called trial, apart from being politically motivated, also did not meet the international standards when it comes to fair and public hearing by a competent, impartial, and independent tribunal. The court hearings were not accessible to observers nor to public, and maybe worth noting that in his final statement to the court, Vladimir Kara-Murza said that his trial resembled Shaw's trials in the 1930s in the former Soviet Union. The European Union, of course, stands in solidarity with Mr. Kara-Murza and all the others who are politically persecuted, detained, condemned, or intimidated by the Russian authorities. for the mere fact that they are fighting for human rights and trying to ensure some kind of plurality and freedom of opinion in the Russian society. And we call, of course, on Russia to immediately release all those who have been imprisoned and sentenced on politically motivated charges. And the whole statement by the HRVP will be issued shortly.
Thank you. Any other questions on foreign affairs for Peter? Foreign affairs? Yeah. Or on this? Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Peter. It's maybe a naive question, but there's quite a lot of prominent dissidents that the Russian regime has now thrown in jail. And Mr. Kara-Murza is only the latest. And this resembles more and more the Soviet times. And back then, the West somehow managed to somehow negotiate with the Soviets at least exile for people like, you know, Solzhenitsyn and so forth. I mean, is that something that Europe should maybe look into, to say that despite the conflict you have with Russia now and so forth, at least to offer them the possibility to get, you know, under brackets, rid of these dissidents and thereby actually saving their lives, because we know what's going to happen to him very likely in these 25 years. Would that be a thing, a big dissident exile support program? No, I'm serious.
Thank you, Oliver. Indeed, I mean, you are right. Mr. Kara-Murza is one of too many who have been already detained or imprisoned or sentenced to harsh, outrageous sentences, and one of too many who have been intimidated for daring to speak out their mind against what Kremlin is doing, against the illegal aggression against Ukraine. And the European Union, as I mentioned, and as the statement by HRVP recalls, is standing in solidarity with these people, and we are constantly looking for ways how we could help these people. I mean, we are already helping many who left Russia, many who are still in Russia for obvious reasons. We will not go in public in details how we are supporting and helping them, but of course this is something that is very important for us. The civil society, the independent, the NGOs in Russia have been bulldozed to silencing. Russian authorities have used two pieces of legislation, the so-called foreign agents law and the undesired organization law, for years in order to clear, so to speak, the scene of any dissenting voices. So the European Union takes this very seriously, and we are looking for all the possible avenues how to support these people, how to help them and their families, of course, because behind every imprisoned activist or opposition politician or human rights defender, there is also his family or her family who are being intimidated, if not prosecuted as well. So this is something which we take very seriously, and the EU is constantly reviewing and looking for ways how to show our solidarity in a form of a concrete support. But again, for obvious reasons, I would not go into more specific details.
Okay, we'll move on to other foreign affairs issues. Nawab.
Thank you, Eric. I think this is for Nabila because it is on Sudan. And what is your latest reaction, sorry, to the situation there? I saw the statement by High Representative Mr. Borrell on Saturday, but since then the situation has reportedly deteriorated. So are you calling on EU citizens to leave the country? Thank you.
Nabila.
Thank you, Nawab, for your question. Well, I mean, as you said, I would recall still the HRVP statement that was published yesterday, if I'm not wrong, or the day before yesterday. The EU strongly condemns the eruption of violence between the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces since Saturday in Khartoum and the rest of the country. We strongly deplore the loss of lives and the violations of international humanitarian law. We take note of the temporary ceasefire brokered by the UN and urge all sides to show leadership and engage in an immediate cessation of hostilities. At this juncture, critical juncture, priority should be given to silencing of guns, de-escalating of the situation, and resolving these differences through dialogue. In the past month, the Sudanese parties, including the SAF and the RSF, have made tremendous effort to bring back the country towards the path for democracy through agreeing the framework agreement paving the way towards a civilian-led government. And these past events jeopardize those important gains. I would like to refer you also to HRVP's outreach during this weekend. Over the weekend, he spoke to Williams Ruto, who's Kenya's president, to whom he expressed his full support for his efforts to convene IGAD member states to contribute to the resolution of the crisis in Sudan. He also spoke to the foreign minister of Egypt, Sameh Shokri, and Abdallah bin Zayed Al Nahyan from the UAE. The message of the EU is extremely clear, which is cessation of hostilities, de-escalation of the current situation, urging for the respect of the international humanitarian law and the protection of citizens, of civilians. Daily humanitarian pause necessary for the welfare of the Sudanese and the foreign citizens, and we're putting the political process back on track. That's extremely important. All efforts are welcome to seek ways to support dialogue and mediation, return to civilian-led transition. And of course, we call on external actors to refrain from interfering. And of course, the EU stands ready to support such efforts. We have been also in touch with, at different levels with international and regional partners, the UN, member states, the African Union, IGAD, and Saudi Arabia. When it comes to the citizens, the EU member states currently estimate that there is a low number of EU citizens in the Sudan, probably in the hundreds. Ensuring their safety is a key priority, and we are making all efforts to contribute to this by supporting member states. As the situation is evolving rapidly, we recall the importance for EU citizens in Sudan to follow the recommendations given by their member states, for example, registering their presence. And we, of course, continue to facilitate a common situational awareness and information exchange among EU member states and partners in order to be ready to identify coordinated solutions for the EU citizens if necessary and possible.
Thank you. Any other questions on this for Nabila? I see two hands raised in the chat. Well, one now. Zoyana, please only keep your hand raised if it is on this. Okay, Zoyana, you have the floor, assuming it's on Sudan.
Okay, I kept my hand raised because I wanted to put my question to Peter, so I can wait better to do that, yeah?
Okay, you're the only one with a question on foreign affairs, so go ahead.
So thank you very much. My question is about President of Brazil. As you heard, he called for the creation of sort of political G20 in order to sit Russia and Ukraine at the negotiating table. And also he calls the European Union and the United States also for a stop or halt in the supply of weapons to Ukraine so that the war, in his opinion, doesn't continue in this case. So my question is, have you estimated this initiative? How did you perceive it? And is it being discussed at some level? This is my first question, and I have next one. If I have the opportunity, I would like to continue then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Zoriana. Without really commenting on each individual remark and context in which these remarks have been made, I mean, in reference to what the Brazilian president is reported to say, I can only recall a few basic facts. The fact number one is that it is Russia and Russia only responsible for illegitimate, unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. So there's no question about who is the aggressor and who is the victim. That's one thing. Russia is killing Ukrainian civilians, destroying Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. Russia is kidnapping Ukrainian children. Russia is stealing Ukrainian property and territory. And the United States and European Union, together with other international partners, what we are doing, we are helping Ukraine to exercise its legitimate right for self-defense. Russia is in breach of UN Charter. This is recognized by Brazil as well. Brazil voted, together with over 140 countries in the UN, to condemn the Russian aggression. and to call for stopping it and to call on Russia to withdraw its soldiers from the entire territory of Ukraine in its internationally recognized borders. This was also echoed in the G20 statement from Bali, where Brazil is also a member. So it is not true that the EU and the US are helping to prolong the conflict. The truth is that Ukraine is a victim of aggression, illegal aggression in breach of UN Charter. It is true that the EU and the US and other international partners are supporting Ukraine in its legitimate defense, because if not, then the Ukraine would face destruction. The Ukrainian nation and Ukraine as a country would face a destruction, because these are the stated aims of Putin's war. And when it comes to peace initiatives, the European Union has supported peace initiatives long before Putin decided to launch this bloodshed against the Ukrainian people. We offered on a number of occasions possibility to Russia to deal with its concerns in a civilized way behind a negotiating table. The response was the unfortunate aggression from February last year. And since then, of course, there have been a number of peace initiatives and efforts, or at least various actors have tried to call for peace. But every peace offer was met by yet another escalation by Putin. He started to use energy as a weapon. He started to use hunger as a weapon, affecting not only Ukrainians, but people all around the world. He started to weaponize winter, and he started to use the nuclear intimidation and nuclear threats. So in this situation, of course, the EU is supporting any peace initiative that would stop Putin from continuing this illegal aggression. And what is very important, the European Union, of course, supports peace as soon as possible. But let's not forget, Ukraine is a victim. So Ukraine has to define under what conditions a possible peace talks would start.
Exactly. You had a follow-up question or another issue. Zoriana, go ahead.
Thank you. So my next question is regarding sanction package against Russia. So the German Vice Chancellor called on the European Commission to impose sanctions on the Russian civil nuclear sector in order to get rid of this dependence as well as it could be possible, and to cut the source of income for Russia. So at what stage is the development of 11th package of sanctions now? When can we expect a Commission proposal, and will we see nuclear sanctions among the proposed measures? Thank you.
So, Yana, as you know, we never comment either on the content or the process related to the preparation of sanctions package, and I'm afraid there is no exception to the rule in relation to the question that you've asked today. We ask for your understanding. Okay. Any other questions on foreign affairs for Peter? No. I see one hand raised. Tommaso. Or perhaps it's on foreign affairs and I missed it. Sorry. Tommaso, you have the floor.
Yes, good afternoon, Tommaso Gallavotti in Kronos. It's actually on foreign affairs, it's for Peter. I mean, it's more a bilateral matter, but I wonder if the EU has anything to say on this matter, because it's pretty high in the Italian press. The son of a Siberian oligarch is called Artem Us. He fled from house arrest in Italy. He was actively wanted by the US justice, and he fled because he was mysteriously left under house arrest. And this issue has come up pretty high in the Italian press. I just wonder if the EU has anything to say about this. Thank you.
Peter.
For sure, not me.
For sure, not me. Yeah, I don't think we have a comment on this, Tommaso. Sorry. Okay. Any other questions for us today? Oliver.
It's a rule of law, Hungary, European values question. Maybe I've missed it, but there's a new Hungarian law apparently voted into force already last week by the parliament that actually authorizes Hungarians to report same-sex families. So if they have neighbors they suspect to be same-sex families, they're now legally authorized to snitch on them. Did the Commission already have a look at that law? And if so, what do you intend to do about it, especially in light of your infringement procedure in Luxembourg against Hungary because of the so-called LGBT propaganda law.
Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Oliver. Look, we are of course aware that Hungary is in the process of transposing the EU whistleblower directive into Hungarian law. I think this comes in this context. To date, no measures that constitute the transposition of the directive have been officially notified to us. Once notified, the Commission will assess the completeness and conformity of these measures with EU law, as we always do. On your other question related to the infringement case that is now before the Court of Justice, I think our position is clearly known. That Hungary here is in breach of EU law. But once the case is before the court, the case is with the court. So there's no further comment for us to make at this stage.
Any other questions on rule of law for Christian today? No. Any other issue for us today? No. Thank you very much. So remember, tomorrow college meeting in Strasbourg. The press events will take place there, and this afternoon we have a technical briefing here in the press room on the financial package. Thank you very much.